In the summer of 1947, in the remote desert of New Mexico, an event occurred that would ignite one of the most enduring mysteries of the 20th century. An event that would capture the imagination of millions and spark an unyielding debate about the possibility of life beyond our world.
Within a minute or two comes the flash sound on the newswire. Bing, 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 bing.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
Hundreds of witnesses claim it was a flying saucer. In fact, the U.S. Army Air Force put out a press release which confirmed that story and later denied it.
In short, what I'm saying is the creatures in both film footage are identical. They are identical.
My hat's off to the people who created it, or that poor alien that's dead on that table.
I looked over in the field one night and I saw some red lights rise out of that field. I estimated maybe about a quarter mile away.
My impression is that those films are genuine, that they are not to create a hoax. And anyone who says it's a hoax, I challenge them right now. Go ahead and recreate it.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection.
A military team was dispatched to the site, and soon after, the first news reports began circulating. What was initially described as the recovery of a flying disc by the military would soon take a dramatic turn, setting the stage for decades of speculation and mystery.
I was called to headquarters, was given copies of a press release which stated in essence that we had in our possession a flying disc. I was told to hand deliver to the 4 news media we had in town at that time, 2 radio stations and 2 newspapers.
Within hours of the initial announcement that the military had recovered a flying disc, the U.S. Army issued a surprising retraction. The military quickly claimed that the wreckage was not a UFO, but rather a weather balloon. This sudden shift in narrative raised suspicions and fueled public confusion. The military's conflicting statements only added to the mystery. Why had they first confirmed the discovery of a flying disc, only to recant it so quickly? The abrupt reversal sparked immediate questions about what had really happened in the desert and whether something far more extraordinary was being hidden.
Right outside Hangar 84, the Roswell Industrial Air Center. It used to be Walker Air Force Base. During the Walker Air Force, while it was still in operation, when the UFO crashed in Roswell, New Mexico, that they had brought this UFO to this hangar with the aliens. And from there, the story is they have taken it to, I believe, in Dallas, to an Air Force base.
Daddy came in so excited, and he said what they saw was not from this world. There were 2 bodies that were laying on the ground outside of this craft, and that there was one, what he called little person. And he said there's one little person that was walking around, and he said they were still alive. And he said that the other 2 were dead, and that this one that was alive was very sad. My dad would not have gotten excited over a weather balloon. He was not easily excitable. And this is the most thrilled I'd ever seen him in my life. He thought that was the most fantastic thing in the world.
The cameraman writes that he photographed 3 strange beings. Each was crying, clutching a box close to his chest. They cried louder as we approached, he writes. One of the officers managed to pry loose the box by hitting the being with the butt of his rifle.
I feel very sorry for whoever that was. If it was from some other world, planet, their family will never know what happened to them. They'll never go back home.
Well, we're sitting at a bar, and this guy I knew a little bit, not real well. And I I'm not going to say what town it was in, but we got to talking. And he said, well, I was at Roswell where they say the aliens crashed. And boom, that was it. He didn't say no more. You know, like he woke up and like, uh-oh, I'm shooting my mouth off.
He kept saying, there's no need for us to be afraid. They're not here to hurt us. And he said that he really felt badly that we couldn't help them.
The reason that the incident was quieted down, the main reason was panic. That we're all of a sudden we're confronted with something from another place or another time or another dimension, or we had no idea what we're dealing with. And relating that all the way back to 1938 with H.G. Wells and the invasion of the Martians and all people committing suicide and doing crazy things, they're afraid it'd just bring total chaos. Also, they had to take into consideration what we're dealing with here, a new technology.
We're not allowed to speak about it, and others would just walk away. He said it was a hush deal on the UFO back then, and you were not allowed. He has told me to my face that you were not even allowed to speak about the UFO. Yeah, speak about something else.
The best evidence we have from a number of eyewitness sources is that the craft and the bodies were brought to Hangar 84 on the Roswell Army Airfield and stored overnight before transport. What we understand from the eyewitness testimony is the bodies were sealed in a large wooden crate kept at the center of the hangar. It's absolutely brilliant what they did. They announced they have a flying saucer, but they've already captured it. They've already got it. There's nothing to see, so nobody goes out looking for the thing. Then they shift everything to Fort Worth. The higher headquarters says, no, those guys made a mistake. It was just a weather balloon. The press can't find Jesse Marcel because he's in Fort Worth and he's been silenced.
You know, when he came back from Carswell, after flying the debris, he did tell me not to talk about this, told my mother not to talk about this. This is a non-event. Play like it never happened. Don't even talk about this with your friends, which I didn't. And years later, he confided that he was actually part of the cover-up because he went along with the Air Force explanation, even though he knew full well that that was not true.
There's corroborative testimony that suggests somebody was putting pressure on people to silence them, and they used what means were necessary to keep those people silent. With the military people, it was merely the threat of imprisonment and going to jail because they understood that. With some of the civilians, they were told that if you ever talk about it, you will be killed.
I said, yes, I did handle it. And he started emphasizing, no, you didn't. Well, my mother was pretty strict, and we didn't lie. So I'm insistent that, yes, I saw it, yes, I held it. And he got mad, and he got louder. And he had one of those, looks like a small baseball bat that hooks on the side of your belt. And he took that out, and he's holding it, and he starts beating his hand. Every time he said something, he would hit that on his hand. And he would say, I want you to understand, you were never there. You did not see anything. You did not hear a conversation. And he said, if you can't understand this, there are things that we can do. He said, we could take you out here in the middle of this desert. He said, this is a big desert here. He said, no one will ever find your bodies, ever. No one will ever know what happened to you. He said, the only way I'm going to let you stay around or live is if you promise you'll never talk about this the rest of your life. So I told him I wouldn't.
Despite these official clarifications, many still believe that the government's explanations fail to account for the strange materials and eyewitness accounts, deepening the suspicion.
It's like they get treated badly for seeing a UFO, so they wish not to even speak about it anymore. And so I'm sure it was much easier on them if they just keep it to their own self.
I've been flying for 35 years. I'm 49 years old. I started flying when I was 15, and I've flown all over the world, flown for 26 years high-performance jet aircraft in the military, and I have never seen a UFO, and I've never talked to any pilot that has.
I've been an airline pilot for 3 years, but I've been flying for about 20 years. I looked over in a field one night and I saw some red lights rise out of that field. I estimated maybe about a quarter mile away. They rose to maybe 150 feet in the air, and they kind of lowered back down toward the field. And then they rose back up, and they were moving constantly. And then the lights disappeared. I mean, I've seen meteors and stuff shoot across the sky, and I occasionally could see the light of the space shuttle going by or something like that, you know. But it's nothing I can't explain. I cannot explain that.
Marcel's claims that the material recovered was unlike anything he had ever seen, possibly not from Earth, ignited the theory that the crash was of extraterrestrial origin.
I think at last count, I had spoken to around 4 dozen people who handled various aspects of the debris. The most dramatic is the foil-like material that you could wad up in a ball and let it go and it would unfold itself.
They tried to burn it and they couldn't burn it. It wouldn't catch on fire, and they took out their pocket knives and they tried to cut it and they couldn't cut it.
I sincerely believe we had the crash of something from outer space, because we still don't have materials that compare with the descriptions I've gotten of the material that was picked up out on the ranch and brought into town.
You couldn't burn it. You couldn't tear it. Take the aluminum foil, the material that looked like aluminum foil, wad it up in your hands, then it would come out without a crease on it.
One of the things that I have a lot of fun with is the story about the metal that they wadded up and they crunch up in their hand and it comes back.
You could crush it in your hand and it would, wrinkles would all come out. It'd just straighten back out.
I guess they all had their chance to play with it for a while, and it was laying on the table, so I reached over and picked it up. And I played for it probably about 5 minutes. When you would wad it up in your hand, you couldn't feel it in your hand. You couldn't feel you had anything there. And it would go to a size that was so small that you'd have to look to see if it was still in your hand. And then when you drop it, it spread out all over the table.
One of the people that interviewed me once before says, well, we don't have anything like that today. So I kind of chuckled and I waited till we got off the air and I said, you remember what you said about the technology? We don't have anything like that today. I said, but it's right before your eyes. And he says, what do you mean? And I says, well, for instance, like this. I said, I got these about 3 years ago. They're really interesting. You know, we don't have anything like that today, do we? This is called memory metal. It goes back to its original shape. I got it because I got these frames because I was always sitting on my glasses and always ended up having to buy new frames. Well, I've had these now for 3 years, and obviously they're in good shape.
My belief is the reason they kept all this secret was they wanted to try to copy the materials. Is, you know, not have to share it.
The material was described as unusual, light, yet incredibly strong, with strange markings. Some of the objects were described as having a metallic, shiny surface, and others were said to be made of a thin, flexible material.
What the debris looked like was stainless steel that had become in contact with very extensive heat. It would be like very bright, and then it would be a pink, and then to a dark brown, and almost to a black.
My father was on the intelligence team at the Roswell Army Airfield, and it was his job to look at what they thought was a crashed aircraft or crashed something out there out of Roswell. When he came in, he was very excited. He woke my mother and myself up at must have been 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and he wanted us to see what he was bringing in from the field. He said, this is parts of a flying saucer. And it was all brought in and spread out on the kitchen floor, and we just looked at it. You know, I picked up this particular I-beam and held it up to my upper left to look at it with the kitchen light reflecting on the inner surface, and that's when I saw the writing or the symbols of some sort. I thought at first, this is hieroglyphics or some kind of writing like that. It certainly looked alien to me. The debris in the film was somewhat different than the debris that I saw on the kitchen floor. Certainly the symbols on the so-called I-beam were much larger. The size of the beams are certainly different. The one I saw was probably greatest 3/8 of an inch in cross-sectional diameter, 12 to 18 inches long. The beam in the film certainly was much larger than this, several inches in cross-sectional diameter. If this is an authentic film, then it could have come from a different portion of the craft. Actually, the material that I saw almost resembled something that could have been blown out through the side of the craft, like there was an in-flight explosion just spreading debris or blowing debris out of the side of the craft.
Can you take us through these symbols and explain them?
Yes. Well, trying to take into account the slight differences here. This seems to be a broken letter, which is consistent with an E.
Yes.
And then this looks a reasonably clear...
The inverted V, yes.
Lambda at the L.
Right.
Which perhaps is the clearest Greekness here.
Yes. And in an English pronunciation, how would you say that? L.
Yes, L.
And in, yes.
Yeah. Then we've talked about this, what
E.
may be an X or an E twice. This, I mentioned, looks like a phi, an F. That's a bit of a mess in the photo. In ancient Greek, if this were Eleutheria, it would be a U, which would be written as a V.
Yes.
Then this would be quite consistent with the TH sound at certain periods in the
That's the
Greek
circle
world.
with the horizontal
yes,
line.
in the after the period of Alexander the Great down into the Roman Empire, that's an alternative, fine. Then we have another of
double E. And
then
the P shape.
The R, yes, the
That's
row. Then a rather complex thing. If that's going to be read as a simple I cannot explain the additional bits.
I see.
One does get a letter like that sporadically throughout the Mediterranean
Someone's
world.
handwriting, perhaps.
Can mean a various number of things. Sort of thing you keep in the back locker if you need an extra letter, as it were, when you're inventing alphabets. But if it's an I, it's an odd one. And then not impossible that that's an A. From the photo, I cannot quite see the bottom line. It looks like a delta, simply, but a badly written A that would not cause too much trouble. I could see that somebody has written Eleutheria there. I could.
And that means?
Freedom. It's whether there's any more at the beginning. It doesn't look as though it looks as though it's all there, doesn't it? It begins and ends.
Yes.
So that's something.
So that is
something. Yes.
Something you wouldn't necessarily disagree with.
No, if it were a broken piece, you would have to say, I don't know what was here. It might have said no freedom.
Do you think that might be the name of a vehicle, perhaps?
Greek boats had names like that in the ancient world. You'd name your boat with a concept sometimes.
Oh, really? If you were to find a strange piece of metal in your garden, and it had these symbols and legends on, what would you make of it?
I would try and guess where it might come from, which in this case is the trouble that we don't know, because everything has a context, and sometimes it's meaningful only in that context. Say if this were the name of a craft, Eleutheria, that would give meaning to the inscription.
If this, as it appears, is involved with highly advanced technology, would you be able to relate that as being an ancient text or script somehow in juxtaposition with something of advanced technology, and from that point of view, meaningful? For example, when Thor Heyerdahl set sail, he called his vessel Ra, didn't he? Calling back to a previous age.
Point, yes.
Is this...
well, from the purely Greek point of view, and let's say that this looks to be Greek-based, the technology, of course, is totally alien to the ancient world as far as any evidence exists. And the addition of the inscription would therefore suggest that it has nothing to do with that particular world. And as I suggested, because of the letter forms not earlier than that, it could be something totally separate, of course.
Those symbols on the object that I saw on the film do not resemble any language that I studied myself. I mean, they vaguely resemble maybe capital Greek letters, but then again, capital Greek letters are different. They're not Egyptian, they're neither Old Egyptian, Middle Egyptian, Late Egyptian, Demotic, Coptic. They're not Arabic, they're not Persian. They're not Latin, obviously, they're not Greek. The perfect workmanship of the signs themselves are the perfectly round circles, the perfectly straight lines. They don't waver and they don't vary in width and in depth as far as I can tell on the tape. I would assume that the society who produced that piece is either comparable to our own society in its technological achievement or possibly more advanced.
You wonder if that might not have been some sort of control mechanism, that they put their hands in the grooves that are made for that, and maybe there's some way they can control the craft just by thought transference, by thinking about something with the hands in contact with this plate, that maybe it's some very unusual, very weird control mechanism.
In the years that followed, the Roswell incident was largely forgotten by the mainstream. But in 1995, new revelations began to emerge. The most famous of these claims is the supposed Roswell autopsy footage, which surfaced in 1995. The film, which purportedly showed the dissection of an extraterrestrial being, and it is still contributed to the enduring mystery surrounding the incident.
I believe that the reason that the photographer who took the Centilli films was able to keep the film footage was because he was already in the loop. He already knew what was going on. There was special requirements that needed to be taken on some of the film footage that he had taken. He had the expertise on how to do this. So what happened was that, okay, you go ahead, you take care of this, and as you finish it up in, say, blocks of 10, you call this number. We will dispatch a special courier to pick up the film and carry it back to where it's supposed to go. That happened. He got down to where he had, I believe, between 22 to 25 reels of film. He made the call. Well, by this time, that office had moved.
And I want to explain that little point because in September, I believe it was, our government formally organized the United States Air Force. Thus, the name changed to Roswell Air Force Base. See? But at the time, we were RAAF, Army Airfield.
When he eventually processed the remaining canisters, he tried and went to great lengths to try and get Washington to come and pick the reels of film up, but they didn't.
Knowing that the films were highly classified, probably at a top secret level, who are you going to turn to? No one that he knew was around him, so he couldn't talk because he was told not to mention it to anyone unless he was asked. This would be indicative of a SCI program. He'd be breaching security. Rightly or wrongly, he could still be brought up on charges. Well, after several years, no one asked for him. And I think he actually forgot about him. And I think time went on, and then he had a special event because he had a special person in his life. He wanted to do something for this special person. He didn't have the money to do it. But then he remembered the films. And if he could get the money to do something for this special person, then he could die a happy man. And he's up in years.
Had I not been involved in a company that had commercial interests, I would not have found the film. I found the film purely by accident. And I'm sure, as I've mentioned earlier, if this was part of a research into the subject, I probably would never have found the film.
I say that the film is the evidence and that the cameraman has done his part. Let's leave the cameraman alone and leave him in peace. Let's take the evidence and let's analyze it. Let's put it under a very, very powerful magnifying glass. If it's bogus, the proof will be in the evidence. But if it's genuine, and I believe it is, it's going to have far-reaching ramifications not for just the United States government.
What you are now witnessing is the actual footage of the Roswell autopsy. This surfaced in 1995, allegedly depicting the autopsy of an extraterrestrial being recovered from the famous 1947 Roswell UFO incident. This video generated intense public interest and skepticism, sparking a renewed wave of UFO and alien conspiracy theories. The being shown in the video appears to be a small humanoid, about 4 feet tall, with large black almond-shaped eyes, a bulbous head, grayish skin, and a thin, fragile-looking body. The creature does not have visible external genitalia, and its hands have 3 fingers, which is consistent with some popular depictions of greys, a type of extraterrestrial being in UFO lore. The skin of the alien appears to be smooth and gray, though it looks somewhat leathery or waxy in texture. The body is shown lying on an operating table, where it has been cut open to expose its internal organs. A team of men in surgical scrubs, gloves, and masks can be seen performing the autopsy. One person, often referred to as the lead surgeon, uses a scalpel to make incisions in the alien's body. The video shows various internal organs being removed and examined. One of the most curious moments is when the surgeon removes and inspects what appears to be a brain, which is small and smooth, though no further detailed analysis is shown in the film. The video also depicts the dissection of what appears to be an unusual pouch inside the alien's body, possibly speculated to be part of the digestive or reproductive system, though the exact nature of the internal organs is left unclear.
I would challenge anyone to replicate that film on 1947 film stock. I don't think it's possible. However, I do fully appreciate that any special effects company are able to recreate a scene, and they would be able to have you and I sitting in a car down Dealey Plaza with John F. Kennedy. They are able to create the dinosaurs and the creatures that you see in films like Jurassic Park. But that's one aspect of special effects. But really, I don't think it is possible.
Knowing how difficult it is for us in the live effects world to actually simulate cutting skin, I started looking at it and saying to myself, if in fact this isn't real, I would be real proud of creating an image like that myself today. In fact, I want to talk it over with some guys here in the studio as to how we would do that.
When was this supposed to be?
1947. The question is whether or not we could do this if it weren't real. And let's take it back to just before the cut.
The organic quality of the legs and the feet, and all that looks very good.
You see how uniform the blood is on the inside surface of the skin and the amount of drippage down the side where it's uniformly wet on the inside? But, I mean, we never were able to do that. All right, let's fast forward it to the skull. Yeah, this is pretty incredible if it's a built prop. Point is if we did this, I'd be pretty proud of it.
Yeah.
This is what I find most interesting.
Yeah, it's very real.
Is the peeling of this skin and how to create this.
Uneven
exactly, and how to create that on a skull.
Is to cast the skull inside the skin.
But what about the wetness?
And what about the unevenness of it? It's not like it's been cored.
And what about the bleeding of it, the wetness of it that is not, you don't see tubes spurting, you don't see blood drip, it's just all evenly wet.
What materials are out there that will duplicate skin like that. I mean, it's mostly the silicones that we're using now, specially formulated
That's what I said, exactly.
silicones, and
They didn't
I don't
have
know
those in
who's
1947.
no,
did
and no, they didn't. And anybody that's got access to them now has been out there doing a lot of big-time Hollywood monster movie stuff.
Yeah, and I don't know how they did this. If it's been done today to look like it was done then, it would be a many, many, multiple thousands of dollars.
Stan, even if it wasn't made to look, period. I mean, just to do this properly would be really...
Be very expensive. And my hat's off to the people who created it, or that poor alien that's dead on their table.
Do you think you'd be able to replicate this exactly?
Yes, without any doubt at all.
What do you think your problems will be?
I think it's going to be a little bit of problems of matching, but I don't think that's a major problem.
Matching?
Matching the exact the sculpt, for example, will have to be matched.
What sort of support staff do you think you'd need in terms of costume, manufacture, props?
There are elements of all of those things in there as well. I mean, we're going to have to match that whole set and all of those costumes and everything else. A lot of that stuff, it's just going to be a buying trip. A lot of it's going to be actually like a prop buyer, having to send out and get the stuff. The set itself is very simple. It's just the window at the back and the corridors. The autopsy table is actually a real autopsy table, I think. So again, it would be a matter of tracking that down. If the film is 1947, then whether all the things I saw and all the things I feel are questionable, because it's very, very difficult for me to believe that anyone in 1947 could have faked it to that level.
Certain rumors circulate the film industry about certain special effects experts who have actually claimed to have made this film.
First I've heard of that. I mean, I can tell you that every special effects company in town have contacted us to say that they can replicate it. I've not yet heard of any special effects companies that say they have shot it. However, you know, if they have, please come forward and put us all out of our misery. And please, you know, show some evidence to prove it. But I can tell you now, that's not going to happen.
So somebody else is looking for a little bit of fame, perhaps, on the back of this film.
Absolutely. I mean, photographs have circulated and various disinformation has been circulated. And I think that when you look at the source of where this disinformation is coming from, you know, there is a campaign out there to ridicule the film, and I accept it's a target, but the film still maintains its integrity.
Medical professionals and critics of the video also pointed out that the autopsy procedures seemed inconsistent with real-world practices, particularly the lack of basic hygiene and medical protocol, as well as the odd placement of the alien's organs.
I have to say I feel that what we've seen here is a hoax. What we're seeing here is somebody photographing this intentionally letting the image go out of focus. It just doesn't make sense that he would go in and make no adjustment on the focus.
The cameras in general use at that time by the military were Filmo cameras made by Bell & Howell. The camera did not have through-the-lens focusing. So if it maintained focus, there could be the possibility that it was done with modern-day equipment, which you can maintain focus, and that it was simulated rather than real footage from 1947. The fact that it lost focus is consistent with the type of equipment that they had to be using.
There's one case in particular where they're sawing the skull, where the person operating the camera continuously moves to a place repeatedly that he's not going to see anything, the doctor's back, and doesn't make the effort to go around the other side to look at the saw coming towards you and perhaps get a better view.
He keeps moving to keep out of the way of the surgeons. If you look at the surgical crew, they're moving also, and he's just trying to be inobtrusive.
We've had this out with the camera because, if nothing else, his integrity in terms of camera work is the only thing that's actually forced the comment out of him, because people have criticised the camera work. The cameraman was dressed in the same outfits as the surgeon, so he was restricted in his movement. And he said that the handheld camera was standard issue at that time, and they didn't treat it any different because it was either an experiment or an alien creature.
The role of a photographer in the military is usually to record an event. It is not his job to do pretty pictures. And this, I think, was a very adequate job of recording an event.
I will say that there's some terrific work done here, but I do not believe that this is a real event that I'm seeing.
Every fake I've seen, the impression of fake comes up immediately. Let's put ourselves in the position of someone who decides to make a fake. Why in the world someone would invest such an amount of money, of efforts, of mise-en-scène to put together a 23-minute film of this kind? It defies reason. It doesn't make sense.
Despite the controversies, the Roswell autopsy video had a lasting impact on popular culture. It contributed to the ongoing fascination with the Roswell incident and the broader topic of UFOs and extraterrestrial life. It also reignited public interest in the idea that the U.S. government was hiding evidence of alien encounters.
I see nothing in this picture which leads me to believe we're dealing with aliens as opposed to earthlings with peculiar characteristics. The wreckage doesn't look like anything I've seen from descriptions of wreckage by witnesses I trust. I can find nothing to link it.
It doesn't seem to me that somebody has put together a gigantic spoof here. If they have, boy, they're wasting their time in engaging in some small ripoff like this. They should be in Hollywood making some fantastic films with Steven Spielberg or something.
Nothing about this thing feels phony. If you came to me and said that you created this illusion, you'd be working here like that.
My guess is that this was done by somebody strictly for money. I think eventually it will be shown to be a hoax, but by that time, Santilli will have collected his royalties from the different television companies throughout the world, and he will have made the majority of his sales of videos.
If it's a true document, it is a document of exceptional importance. If it's a fake, it should be hailed as one of the most extraordinary fakes ever put together by a filmmaker.
I'm positive that there's information being withheld from the public domain concerning the Roswell event.
I'm hoping that they will someday release the information.
Tell us what actually happened.
No evidence to say this is definitely nothing on the film which makes me say this is definitely a hoax. My feeling is that probably about 98% feeling is that this is probably a man-made hoax.
You did not find fault with the autopsy as such, procedures and so on?
No. What I said was I couldn't say that a doctor didn't do that or carry out those procedures.
Right. You were confident about the conduct of the surgical methods used, for example?
They didn't look as though they were techniques that were being employed by a doctor. One might see this sort of technique applied by somebody who's not a pathologist. Or you may, a surgeon.
You said that you were 98% sure it was manufactured.
Yes.
But 2% you allowed for that you might be wrong.
Yes, simply because I was dealing with such poor quality material with a section of something. And frankly, 2% was probably being very generous.
Now, if given that 2% that you may have been wrong, you would have been 100% wrong, would you not?
I make an estimate based on the probability of this being anything other than a hoax.
Given a professional skepticism as to the medically unknown?
Given a degree of skepticism, but given a knowledge of how tissues are supposed to behave.
Human tissues or animal tissues?
Yes.
I'll tell you what I'm coming to. The question of creating this model is something that is being taken very seriously by the company. And a special effects department, world famous, is being provided with a budget as required in order to fabricate this.
That's right.
Now, if it turns out to be impossible,
I would be very surprised.
Well, that's another expertise with respect.
Indeed, but I would be extremely surprised.
Yes, if he says, I can't do it,
We're talking about the film or the model?
Everything, the film, including the model.
Yes, we've got two aspects to it.
Everything, nothing left out. Nothing left
Somebody
out.
comes up and says it's impossible. It would be interesting.
The expert, one of the experts, if somebody of you said that is a human being, we'd have a real fight in our hands with you and the other experts, wouldn't we? You accept that?
Well, there's nothing on that film which makes me think about the human body.
Exactly. So you'd have if somebody said, oh yes, that's a human being, you'd say, I'd like to see your evidence for that, wouldn't you?
Yes, because there are lots of points against it.
So if this expert can't make this film, the model, everything to do with it, he can't do it in 1995, I think you'd be able to say confidently, I don't know what that was being dissected. It would then be a case of it is or it isn't. It's a 50-50 question. If it can't be faked, is it genuine? If it's genuine, I don't know what that is.
If it can't be faked, then I don't know what it is, based on the evidence I have.
My impression is that those films are genuine, that they are not to create a hoax. And anyone who says it's a hoax, I challenge them right now. Go ahead and recreate it. There's certain special effects that they would have to do that what I believe are cream of the crop of the people in the field of special effects say they cannot replicate those. If this is truly the case, then we have something very unique there.
The Roswell incident, which took place in July 1947, remains one of the most intriguing and debated events in UFO history. Over the years, the Roswell incident has evolved into a cultural phenomenon. Despite official explanations, first the weather balloon, and later the suggestion of a top-secret military project known as Mogul, many continue to believe the crash involved extraterrestrial life. The presence of alleged alien bodies and strange debris at the site, as well as the government's rapid response to contain the incident, have fueled these theories. In the decades following, Roswell became a symbol of government secrecy and the cover-up of extraterrestrial encounters. Numerous books, documentaries, and even Hollywood films have contributed to the mythos surrounding the event, making it a focal point for UFO enthusiasts and skeptics alike. In fact, Roswell's significance has only grown, with the town itself embracing its place in UFO lore, holding annual festivals and attracting thousands of visitors from around the world. Despite extensive investigations, including the release of declassified documents and government reports, the true nature of the Roswell incident remains shrouded in mystery. While many have dismissed the idea of a UFO crash as a product of Cold War-era paranoia, others continue to argue that there are aspects of the event that the government has never fully explained. Today, the Roswell incident stands as a poignant reminder of our enduring fascination with the unknown. Whether it was an extraterrestrial encounter, a top-secret military project gone awry, or a combination of miscommunication and myth-making, Roswell has captured the public's imagination for over 70 years. It has become a part of our collective cultural history, symbolizing not only the potential for alien life, but also the limits of what we know about our world and the universe beyond. As we look to the future, with renewed interest in space exploration and the possibility of life beyond Earth, the Roswell incident remains a touchstone in the ongoing conversation about humanity's place in the cosmos. While we may never know the full truth about what happened in the New Mexico desert in 1947, the story of Roswell continues to inspire us to look up to the skies, questioning what is out there and what might be just beyond our understanding.